Hi my friends, welcome to another exciting tutorial. So today we are going to learn how to create this beautiful peel effect in Blender from scratch. It's going to be a lot of fun, it's going to be exciting. You're going to learn a lot of cool tips and tricks along the way. So without much talks, open up your Blender and let's get started. So I'm going to leave a link in the description below in case you want to grab the project file so that all of us can work together. So once you grab the project file, you have your can, your backdrop, and then we have a camera, which is temporarily hidden for now. Right, so if you take a look at this side, this is the camera view and it's locked so that we can see what we are doing in the view of the camera, right? So we can easily position our composition and then see what we're doing. In case you want to learn how to create this can too, I'll leave a link in the description below for you to grab to watch. I have a tutorial on how I created this can. Right, so let's now jump into today's tutorial. So first we are going to need a duplicate of this can, which we are going to apply all our effects on. Right, so let's do Shift plus D to create a duplicate, and then we have two cans here. So let's just quickly rename the one we just duplicated. So I'll rename that to peel. And once we are done with the duplicate, next you see all of them have the same size. So next we have to scale the one we just duplicated, right? So let's hit on tab to jump into edit mode, and then let's select, make sure we hit on A to select everything, and then instead of doing S for scale, which will scale it based on the point of the origin, which is here, we don't want that. We want to scale everything based on their normals. So we are going to do Alt S for that shrink, and then we can hold Shift to shrink it up a little bit, right? So that it's a little bit bigger than the main can that we have. So let's hit on tab to jump out of edit mode so that we have something like this. Just scale it a little bit bigger. So let me hide it. You can see this is the original one, and then this is the one we just scaled, right? I think it looks perfect. So all of the edits that we are going to do is going to be on the peel, on the one we just scaled, right? So first, most of the things we are going to do on this is going to be from the modifiers. So the whole effect is going to be from the modifiers tab. So first, let's come to our modifiers tab, and then with our subdivision, let's just decrease the subdivision level to 1, and then let's just apply. So once we are done with the application, next let's add in a particle system, right? So I'll hit on particles, and then I'll hit on this plus to create a new particle. So now with our particle created, if we hit on play, you can see our particle will start emitting. And that's not what we want. We want all of the particles to stay on this object so that they are not emitted, and physics and everything, it should be turned off. So let's see how we can do that. So with our particle settings, let's check, let's drop down the emission tab, and then let's set the number of particles to, let's say, 200, right? So this number is very important. You can set it higher based on the capacity of your PC to handle. The higher you go, the more detail you get at the end, but then the more toll it will take on your PC. So depending on the strength of your PC, you can set this number. So you can even go with 100 if your PC is not that strong, or maybe 50, right? So I'll set mine to 100 for now, or 200, but any of them works. But for the purpose of this tutorial, let's just go 200 for now. We can come back and change it later on if we wish to, right? So once we set the emission to 200, next let's come to our frame start. So we want it to start as 0 and then end at 0, right? So that it's always on. But then still, let's hit on play, and then once I hit on my space bar, you can see all of them are falling at the same time. So we don't want all of them to fall. So let's go to our physics, and then physics tab, let's just set none, right? So now once we hit on play, you can see all of them stay at the same place, right? But then they die, all of them die at frame 50. So let's go, you see at frame 50 everything will be lost from the screen, right? So that is due to the lifetime that we set. So we need to set the lifetime to something bigger than the span of our frame we want the animation to go, right? So in this case, we will set it to something like 500, and then it's going to work. So now if I hit on play, you can see the particles will stay on for the rest of the timeline, the rest of the animation, without dying off. That's exactly what we are looking for. So next, with our particle system in place, the last thing we want to do is to hide all these bubbles. So let's go to our render, then let's go to hello, and then let's set it to none, Right. So we are setting the render as none. Basically, that's it. We are done. Let's just check here. Use modifier stack so that the particle respects the modifiers that we stack, since we are going to use a lot of modifiers. So let's just check this, and then that's it. We are done for the particle system. So now if you come back to our modifiers tab, you can see we have a particle system on top, right? So next, let's add in a new modifier, which is going to be the explode modifier. So the explode modifier is going to explode the geometry we have. Let's just add it and you see what it does. So we come down to physics, and then we locate our explode modifier, or you can equally go to add modifier and then search and then type explode, right? So once we set explode modifier, you can see there's some change that's happening to our geometry here, which is still the peel, right? So if I zoom into my scene, you can see that our can, the peel, is being decimated. It's like there are some particles going on. You can see this well when we turn on our X-ray mode, right? So you can see this is what is happening to the geometry. You can even make it better by turning on cut edges. So once we turn on cut edges, you can see now we have a little bit of some organic shapes going on for us, right? So that will be it for the explode modifier. Next, we need to add in a cloth simulation, right? So that once we explode this, once we hit on the cloth simulation, all of this will be turned, all of these individual particles will be turned into cloth, right? That's how the whole shredding or the whole peeling effect works. It works on the cloth simulation. So next, let's go to our physics, and then let's add in a cloth simulation, right? So with the cloth simulation added, we are going to leave everything as is. You can feel free to experiment with this, but I'm not going to touch everything for now. So let's leave everything as is. The only thing we are going to change later on will be this shape here, right? So we are going to add in some pin groups and then do a lot of cool stuff here and there. Now if we go back with our cloth simulation on, and then we hit on play, you can see our particle will start falling down into space, meaning the cloth simulation is working, right? But now we want the main can, which is the main one inside, to be affected, to affect the outer can, right? So we want the main can to affect the outer can, meaning we want this to interact with the main one, which we already had. So let's make sure we have the main one selected, and then let's add in a collision object, right? So we come to our physics, and then let's add in a collision, right? So once we add in a collision, it means the main one, which is the inside one, will collide with the peel we created. Let me just uncheck my X-ray mode. So now we can do Control S to save our scene, and then hit on play to see what happens. So I'm going to hit on play to take a little bit of time to compute. So now if we hit on play, it took me a little bit of time to compute everything. You can see what is happening once I start scrolling down my timeline. You can see it explodes and all of the particles fall down into infinity, right? It keeps on falling till all of the particles die, right? Basically, so you can see, right? So that's exactly what we want, and that's the basics of what drives the whole peel animation. So next, let's take a look at our reference image. As you can see, let me just scroll my mouse wheel here. You can see the peeling start from this side, and then once it's done, it gets dispersed to the side, right? So to get this kind of effect, we first need an effector to tell Blender when to start peeling the object, and then we will also need some force fields here and there to tell Blender where all the elements should go, right? So for us to get that, we need to do a couple of things. First, let's select our peel object, go to our modifiers tab, and then let's just hide all these modifiers for a second so that they don't slow us down once we start adding in our effectors and the force field. So once we are done, let's go to our scene properties, and then let's make sure our gravity is unchecked so that all the particles are not affected by gravity. So next, let's add in the effector that we want. So here we are going to do Shift A, empty, and then we can add in any of them would work, but then I'll add in the one that I can easily visualize. So I'm going to select sphere to add in a sphere like this, let's hit on this Y to go on the back orthographic view. Then I'll hit on G to position it in place like this, right? So this is where I want it to end at the end of our animation. So I'll just come to my timeline and then I'll drag to, let's say, frame 140 or let's say frame 130, and then I'll hit on I to create a keyframe at frame 130. Then I'll drag back to frame 1, and then I'll just hit on G, and then I'll position it somewhere here. And then I'll hit on I to create another keyframe. So now if I hit on play, you can see what we have right here. So we start from the top here, and then it slowly moves into the scene. So what I'm telling Blender is it will start from here. So basically the peel effect will start from somewhere here, and then it will slowly peel everything once this empty enters the scene, right? So once we have our empty animation done, next let's find a way to connect this empty with the peel effect so that the peel effect recognizes the empty. So for that, we are going to do a couple of things to the peel effect. One is we need to create a vertex group. So let's select our peel effect, and then let's hit on tab to jump into edit mode, hit on A to select everything, and then now we can go to our object data properties where we have our vertex group, and then let's hit on plus, and then let's create assign to assign our vertex group. So to know whether our vertex group is assigned, just deselect everything and then just hit on select, and everything should be selected. It means all these are chosen as a vertex group, right? So once we created the vertex group, let's rename it to something we can easily identify or remember. I'm going to rename mine to pin for easy access, just because we are going to use this as pins inside our Claude simulation. So let's hit on tab to jump into out of edit mode, and let's locate our physics, our Claude, and let's scroll down till we find shape, right? So here at pin group, we are going to select our pin as the pin object, right? So I have tutorials on how pin works in the Claude simulation. I'm going to leave that somewhere on the screen. Basically, whatever group we selected at pin will tell Blender that, okay, these are pins and they are not supposed to move. So all the simulation will work, but then all these vertex group that we selected will be pins, right? But here in this case, we selected all of the groups, so we selected everything as a vertex group, right? So what this means is we are going to use the empty we created to tell Blender when to deselect some of these pins, right? So once it starts entering, based on the proximity, it will start deselecting this. It will start unpinning this side, so it will unpin all the sides till it enters like this, so that everything will be unpinned, and then the Claude simulation will start kicking in once everything is fully unpinned. I hope this makes sense. Let's continue. It will make sense very shortly, right? So once we are done with that, let's hit on tab, make sure our peel is still selected. Then let's go to our modifiers properties, and then let's add in another modifier, right? So what the modifier we need is we go to edit, and then we search for vertex weight proximity, right? So this is what we are going to use. So I'll click on it to add in our modifier. Let's drag it so that our Claude simulation remains at the bottom. It's very important, right? So for this, it will first ask us about the vertex group. So which group do we want to use? So let's select our pin that we created earlier on, and then it will ask us for a target object. So which object do we want to use as a target object? Let's just select this object here. So I'll select, and then I'll pick my eyedropper, and then I'll select my empty, right? Or you can, the same way, you can just click and then choose the empty here, right? So once we do that, proximity mode is asking us what mode do you want, either on the object level or on the geometry level. So in this case, we want the geometry level, right? Next, since we are working with proximity, we are going to work with these settings here, so the lowest and the highest, right? But before we do, let's just change this mode from object mode to weight paint mode, since we are working with weight paint, right? So let's come here, and then let's select our weight paint like this, right? So now once we select the weight paint, you can see there's some color changes here, right? I'm color changing here. So let's go back to red. Right. So red in Blender in weight paint section is either red or blue. Red is either red or blue. Red means there's nothing affected, and then blue means there's something affected. So what you can see, once this object starts entering into the scene, it starts turning blue like that. So let's work it out until we have some final details. So let me bring this to somewhere here. So we want it to start turning blue somewhere right here, right? So for that, we are going to play with the lowest and then the highest. So I'm going to increase my lowest until I have something like 1, right? And then I'll increase my highest a little bit to just to get a little bit of fall off. So I'll hold maybe 1.2 works best for me, right? So something like this. Okay. So as you can see, it slowly fades into a deep blue. So that's exactly what we want. So for these numbers, it's going to depend. Maybe you are using your own model. It's going to depend on the scale of your Blender scene. So these numbers might change, right? So you have to just play along with it, but you have to always make sure the highest is a little bit bigger than the lowest, right? Yeah, it's going to depend on the scale of your scene, right? But basically you want something like this. The red should be at the back, and then the blue should be here, and then it's slowly facing to a deep blue, right? Then make sure the proximity mode is set to geometry instead of object. So if we do object, it's just once, but if we do geometry, it starts slowly and then it enters nicely like this. So we have that all set up for us. Next, we can go ahead and then run the simulation once again. But before we do, let's just do Ctrl+S to save our progress. And then let's add in the force field again. So we are basically done with the peel effect. Next, let's add in the force field at the top, this side. So if I bring back my reference, you can see that all the objects that are peeled are being dragged to the side. So to get that kind of effect, we need to add in a force field that pulls all the objects in. And then remember, we turned off our gravity here. So let's quickly add in a force field. So let's do Shift A. Before we do Shift A, let's just go back to our object mode, then Shift+A, and then let's go to force field, and then let's add in a force, right? So the force is right here. Let's go to our back view again. The force is right here. Let's hit on G, and then let's position it somewhere here. I'll position mine somewhere here, right? So you can position all of these things anywhere you want in your scene, depending on what you want to achieve, depending on the final animation you want to achieve. So I will recommend you experiment to see different modes and different kinds of animation. So let's select our force field, and then let's go to our physics properties, and then let's increase the strength, but then we are going to increase it in the negative direction, which means it pulls instead of push. Yeah, so let's just decrease it to negative, let's say 2000, right? So it's going to pull the peels, the effects that we create here, the disintegration that is created by this is going to pull all of them towards it, right, to create that nice peel effect that we are going for, right? So basically that's it. Let's do Ctrl+S once again, and then let's do a test. Let's do a test, bake and see. So I'll select this, and then we go back to our modifier stack, and then make sure we have all the modifiers turned on by checking these icons here. Let me check my timeline to 0, and then let's make sure we have all the modifiers turned on nicely like this. And then we go back to our physics with our closed simulation. So make sure we have this selected. Go back to our physics with the closed simulation, and then we can just come to our cache, and then we can hit on bake to bake our animation. But before we do that, let me quickly do one settings. So I'll come back to my particle system, come back to my emission, and then I'll just change this number to something lower. I'll go 800 for now, just for a quick bake and a quick demo. So let's go back to our physics properties, make sure we have the cloth, and then we can come back to cache, and then we can hit on bake to bake the simulation, right? It's going to take a little bit of time. So before you do, please save your progress before you hit on it, because Blender might crash on you depending on your system. So I'll do Control S to save my progress, and then I'll hit on bake. So after the baking, and then I hit on play, there's the animation that we get. You see, once the effector starts entering into the objects based on the proximity, the object starts disintegrating, and then the force field pulls everything out nicely like that. So this is exactly what we are looking for. Next, all we need to do is to add in a little bit of material and then some lighting to finish up our scene, and then we can add in our final camera animation to finish everything off, right? So I'll keep it somewhere here, and then I can just check this and then this just to hide everything out of our scene so that we can see our scene nicely. And then let's hit on the render view to render our final scene, and then let's see some few settings, right? So under my render engine, I've changed it to cycles, and then I'm setting the render to the GPU compute, right? And then under objects, let's add in an HDRI. So I'll drag my shader editor here, and I'll change it from object to world, and then I'll just click on the new, right? So yours might look something like this. Let me just add the HDRI real quick. I'll hit on X to delete everything. Yours might look something like this. So just select this background and then do Ctrl+T to add in an environment texture, and then hit on open, and then we can just quickly plug in an HDRI, right? So you can get a lot of HDRIs for free. Just Google free HDRIs, you'll be able to grab some for free. Any of them might work depending on how you want your scene to look. So I'll just double click to select any random HDRI, and then this is what we have, right? So if you scroll through, you can see nicely like this, right? So one quick thing, a few things that we need to do. Let's give this a different material. Let's give it this kind of gold material. So I'll go to objects, and then I'll go to objects materials, and then with this peel selected, let's come to our materials properties, and then let's hit on this minus to remove all the materials from it. So once all of them are removed, let's just hit on new to create a new material, and let's set the base color to something like this. Let's make it metallic, and then let's decrease the roughness so we get this nice gold effect like this, right? Yeah, so this is exactly what we are looking for. Very simple. Just change the base color, make it metallic, and then decrease the roughness. So once we are done with that, we are basically done with everything. Lastly, let's add in our camera animation. So I'll unhide my camera to bring back this camera here, and then let's come back to our timeline, and then let's add in some camera animation, right? So we want our scene to end at this frame, right? So just as we did, we bring our timeline to frame 40, and then with the camera selected, let's hit on I to insert keyframe, right? So once we do that, we can come back to frame 0, and then with our camera selected, let's move it into the scene. So we can hit on G and then Y to move it on the Y axis till we get something like this. Maybe G, Z to bring it up like this till we have something that we want, right? Or maybe G, Z, just position it anyhow you see fit, right? So something like this, and then I'll hit on I to add in a keyframe. So it's going to start from this keyframe, and then it's going to come inside nicely like this, right? So let's just turn it to viewport shading mode so that we can see the animation play out quickly, right? So if I come to frame 0, then I hit on play, you can see our animation will start, then it will fade in nicely like that, right? So that's it basically. Let me just go back to here, and then we have few settings we need to do. Then we can come to our render properties, scroll down till we have our color management. Then we can change the look to something that fits our liking. Maybe we can go with a medium high contrast, or maybe punchy, just anything that works for you. I'll just leave mine to high contrast. I think it works best. And then I think everything all is set, and just keep in mind this is still editable, right? So we can always come back to our modifiers tab or maybe our properties tab and then increase the number in case we want the particles to be smaller, right? But just bear in mind that the higher you go, the more time it will take to render, or the more time it will take your PC to process everything, right? So I'll set mine for 100 just for the sake of this tutorial. And then once you're done with everything, let's quickly go to our render. So we go to our output and then output. So you can see I have my folder set up like this. I'll just select a folder which I'll render everything. So I've already rendered everything like this. So I rendered them in PNG sequence. So just set everything, file format, set it to PNG, and then color, leave it at RGB or RGBA. Color depth 8 is fine, and then you can leave the compression as it is, right? And then once you are done with everything, you just come here. So if in case you change another thing, in case you change the particles, in case you change these particles, you have to come back to your physics and then bake it again before you do your final render, else your render might not work, right? So in case you do any changes to it, make to the particles, to this peel, right, to the particles, you always have to bake it again, and then you can do your final render like this, right? So once everything is done, just do render animation, and then it's going to go through to render each sequence for you like this, so you get this final beautiful animation, right? So let me just play it one more time. Yeah, it's my friend. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to subscribe and like, share, comment. You can reach out to me, whatever you want to do. It's me. Peace out. See you on the next one. It's my friend, and I'm out.